All right, I'm joined by my two teammates at these Paris Olympic Games remotely, Alex and Katelyn. Guys, we're going to talk all about the marathons. This is basically going to be a marathon-heavy podcast today. But first, let's do a little overview of what we've watched thus far and what's coming up in the next couple of days. Because we're recording this on Wednesday morning. So we have no idea what happens on Wednesday afternoon / evening in Paris. But there's some exciting stuff coming up in these last few days of the track meet at the Olympic Games, capped off by the marathons, which we're going to go deep on for the most part with this podcast. But first, let's get in a time machine and take a trip back to earlier this week. This, I got to say, you guys know me well, and I'm cynical about the Olympics. I have a lot of complaints about the Olympics. But when the track meet begins, all the cynicism fades, and this has been a stellar Olympics on the track, I'd say. Like, what's your favorite moment so far? Katelyn, favorite moment. What do you got so far?
Oh boy. There are a bunch to choose from. I would say loving watching the strategy and everything of those longer races. I think one of my favorite moments was in the 10,000 meters. I just absolutely loved the close, the final kick of the 10,000 meters, and watching Grant Fisher take bronze was an awesome moment. I mean, there are so many moments I can mention. There are probably more exciting moments, but that one for me, I just really felt it, like Team USA getting a medal in that 10,000 meters, closing as strong as he did. It was incredible to watch.
Team USA is kicking ass right now.
Yeah.
And as two Canadians, Alex, we're sort of we have mixed emotions about this. Katelyn, you're jacked, you're American, you're psyched about this. You just get to get all star-spangled bannery right now. But for us, we're we're kind of, we like America, but at the same time, it's like Canadians, we kind of define ourselves by not being American.
Right.
But I got to say, it's like, there's been a real sort of coming out party for a lot of the American runners this time around. And it's really cool. It's been really cool. Alex, what's your moment of these games thus far on the track?
Yeah. Oh my God. Speaking of America, my moment, this was the most emotional moment, maybe not the best. So I'm super hyped for the 1500, as everyone is. That's my favorite race personally to run as well. So I need to see it. I'm really invested in the Jakob versus Kerr hype. I watch them get to the start line. I have my popcorn ready, and my stream cuts as the race begins. God. So me and a whole lot of other Canadians were watching the CBC stream, which had been perfect until the very start of the 1500 meters. And it cuts for 3.5 minutes, as if it were planned. And when my stream comes back, the first shot I get on my TV is Cole Hawker ringing the bell. And I'm thinking I've been duped because it was not on my bingo card whatsoever.
No.
And then, of course, I have to wait 3 hours before I can see the full replay. Someone put it on YouTube. It might have been CBC, the Canadian broadcaster, to their credit. And then I rewatched the race, and that was amazing. Just to see this rivalry never really coming to fruition. Right. This young 23-year-old American ruining it for Kerr and Jakob. And I mean, kudos to him, right? It's Michael, you said this as we're talking before the podcast, seeing someone grow up in front of your own eyes. He used to be a college runner not long ago and now Olympic champion. So I think that was my moment. Even though I am Canadian, I couldn't help to be pretty pumped for Hawker.
And your boy, Alex, your boy came in too. Second.
I forgot to say.
Yeah.
And my boy Nugu's, but also Hawker was my dark horse prediction.
True.
If people have been listening to this podcast, I'm taking full credit for that.
You should.
Oh no, dude, you were you should put some money on that, because I bet you the odds for Cole Hawker were pretty hot before the race, and you had all this inside information. You're like, rumor has it that he's blowing up right now. He's doing things in workouts that he's never done before, and he's ready. And he is a closer, right? He was known as being a really strong final 400 meter runner. I can't believe I watched that race, the replay of that race 3 times last night. And in preparation for talking about this, but also I just kind of wanted to study it a little bit. I cannot believe that Ingebrigtsen left that inside lane open. What What
Rookie
a
move.
total
mistake.
rookie move. You gotta just put one leg in that inside lane to block anybody from sneaking by you. And I mean, he didn't, and Hawker took advantage of it. Such a weird, total Black Mirror moment for Alex when the stream comes back in and we live in an alternate reality where Cole Hawker is dominating the 1500 meters. Yeah, that was super cool.
I really regret not taking advantage of this betting as like a track fan. You feel like you could get, a bit of an advantage doing that. And I haven't yet. And now I kind of kick myself. But yeah, the 15 was amazing. Jakob seemed listless from start to finish. I don't know.
And to be honest,
in the 5.
And to be honest, Alex, you have a few other dark horses that you chose that have also won, which we'll get to later. But I think you did the best out of all of us with the picks because a bunch of your dark horses ran.
I'll give it to you for the Gabby Thomas thing. She looked phenomenal in the 200, and she's been your girl from day one. Hey.
Yeah. I would say that we've got, this has been, like I said, sort of a coronation, to use a fun cliche in the track world, a coronation for a lot of athletes. And Gabby Thomas, definitely one of them. Julian Alford, which would be, I think, my pick for number one moment of the Olympics on the track thus far. There's still a lot left to go, but just the way she executed in that 100-meter final and how exciting it was to watch her win. And my very first thought when she crosses the finish line, she dominated that race from the start all the way through. Like, she had a great start. She got out ahead and no one was touching her. And she just looked like she was in a different category than the rest of the field.
She did.
And my very first thought was, the Netflix producers, they're sitting at home watching this right now. And are they like, oh man, we've got all this like footage of Julian Alford that we just cut out of our docuseries. What do we do for season 2? Do we just do we do season 2? Are we able to, are we able to face her for season 2 and ask her to be a part of the production? But that was my pick. It was that incredible performance. And although, I mean, guys, the 100 meter, the men's 100 meter
that was insane. That photo finish, I couldn't believe it. It was just too close.
Unbelievable.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do we got going on? What do we got going on in the next, let's say Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday? What for you guys? What's your sort of can't miss event that you want to catch before the games close out?
I mean, as a distance fan, I feel funny saying this, but I'm drinking the Lyles Kool-Aid, man. I can't wait to see the men's 200.
Right.
Yeah. I want to see him do the double. So the men's 200 is up there for me. I want to see the 1500s. I want to see the women's 1500s. And the marathons,
obviously the marathons. Yeah. I also want to see the 5,000 just because I want to see because this morning I was watching the heats and I was checking out Ingebrigtsen, and I was thinking of you guys, and I was like, I want to ask Alex and Michael if this is normal, because I was looking at Ingebrigtsen's strategies and I thought, okay, in the 1500, why did he go out front and burn out? And then in this 5,000, I do understand that it was just a heat, but he stayed like completely back for most of the entire race, and then just, came up to grab the win in the end. So I'm like, which is his real strategy that he usually takes on, and which one is he going to execute in the 5,000 in the final?
I have a take on this for the 5,000, and I think it might have been a prescient strategy by Ingebrigtsen. The fives were really slow, which usually indicates that there's some jostling coming up in the later laps, because if you're running much slower than you can, all these runners will be around with a few laps to go as they turn the screw and go way faster. And if you run just, a couple steps back, you might be able to avoid the carnage. And carnage is what happened this morning. I think like 5 or 6 different men hitting the ground between like heat 1 and heat 2. So I don't know, maybe he had that in mind, and looking back, it was a good strategy. I feel awful for these guys. So,
me too.
You have Mo Ahmed, who, as a Canadian, we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but we want him to eventually win his gold. And this 5,000 meters seemed like a really good opportunity for him, especially with 10,000 meter champion Josh Cheptegei pulling out of the 5,000. Yeah. And Mo is in the middle of the fray. He's not running behind or in front, and boom, he falls to the ground and doesn't make it. So I don't know if that's what Ingebrigtsen thought. He knows he has the closing speed to go towards the front when it matters.
I see.
And Yeah.
And I was so bummed out because Ahmed was on my list. I had Canada up there, and I was so bummed out when he fell. Yeah, I did. He was on my list, and so this morning I was changing my predictions because I was like, well, okay, now he's out. He fell. I felt so bad for him and all the other guys that ended up in that carnage on the track in both heats. In two of the heats, there were people who fell. It was horrible.
Yeah, very strange.
Yeah,
really unfortunate. Yeah, but in terms of the 1500 with Ingebrigtsen, I think he just thought he was fitter than everybody else in the field. I think he thought there's nobody that's going to be able to touch me. The workouts are telling me that I can run 3:26.7, close to the world record from the gun. That's a really, really, really hard thing to do. Mm-hmm. But he's one of these types of people who envisions himself as one of the greatest of all time. So, you have to do the part in order to become the thing, the title. So he went for it and just underestimated Cole Hawker. Really,
yeah.
I think he was thinking too much about Josh Kerr and underestimated Cole Hawker and everyone else in the field. So, and for him to come in fourth, he's the perfect villain, right? So it's like kind of has this Shakespearean dramatic tinge to it, which is pretty delicious, actually. So, I mean, I don't want to revel in someone else's failure, but it added a narrative quality to that performance that just sort of fulfilled the full promise of the 1500. Okay, so let's pivot into the two big events that we want to talk about today. And we're going to talk about the men's and the women's marathon. We'll do them in order because the men's marathon is taking place on Saturday at 2 a.m. Eastern time. So set your alarms if you're living on the East Coast of the United States or Canada.
Or don't go to sleep.
Yeah.
Power
I'm
through.
not sure which one. Yeah, I'm not sure which one I'm going to opt for. So we'll talk about the men's race first. Then we'll pivot into the women's race. But before we even get into talking about kind of what you need to know about who's in this race, who to watch out for, and kind of what to anticipate as a viewer, I think we need to talk about, what I would describe as the biggest character in both of these marathons, which is the course itself. Because this course is special. It's special both because it might be the most lovely course in terms of sightseeing ever devised for an Olympics or even just a major marathon, full stop. But it's also maybe the most brutal course that anyone could ever come up with for an Olympic Games. I mean, it's just awful. So we can go through some of these details here. I've made some notes, guys. So this course, it basically hits all the great sights of Paris. You get to see the Eiffel Tower a couple of times, just like with the Boston Marathon with the famous iconic Citgo sign. Mm-hmm. These runners are going to see the Eiffel Tower and they're going to pass by it with about, I think it's a couple of miles, 2 miles to go. So when you see the Eiffel Tower on screen watching the race, towards the end stages of the race, you know that things are getting very real. But this course is brutally hilly. Yep. Like, what's your take on the construction of this course? Like, Alex, what do you think? How do you think the course is going to factor into this race?
I think it's going to remove the time trialers from contention unless they adopt a whole different strategy. I tend to do this because I come from a track background, and that has a bit more merit and value on the track. Is when you look at times really matter, and the marathon matters a whole lot less. Like, these races will be interesting, especially on the women's side, and we'll get to that. But the women have a 2:11 runner, which, like, on most years would make the Olympics on the men's side of things. Yep. Mm-hmm. In Tigst Assefa. And I can't even I can't even put my money on her to win a medal because it's not going to be about times. Mm-hmm. It's going to be about grit. When we make our predictions, like what I did with my predictions, I looked at who did well in like Boston and like tough courses and went from that. So I say it's going to be really tough to predict who actually prevails in a tough course.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
it's-
I was doing the absolute same thing. I was thinking, okay, who ran really well in Boston? Who won Boston? Who won New York? Who won any hilly course? Or even thinking about tough conditions in general. Like there were some runners who had just faced a lot of really difficult like weather, or I mean, I think any kind of obstacle, if you're good at solving problems while you're running, you don't have to be the fastest runner to have the best race. I mean, we go back to climate and thinking of, or weather and thinking about Des Linden in Boston or something like that. You don't always have to have the fastest times to win marathons. And I think that we're going to see that here with these crazy hills. I mean, they have a hill with it, like a 13.5% grade. I mean, that is a serious hill. We're not talking about 6%. There's another one. There's 10%. The first hill is supposed to be the light one. It's supposed to seem like one of the Boston Marathon hills and Heartbreak Hill. And from there on, it just gets harder and harder. I mean, it just gets trickier, and those are going to be some serious hills. So I did the same as you, Alex. I really looked at racers who I think kind of like have the grit to get through a tougher marathon.
Go on like your condo treadmill or your apartment treadmill and crank up the incline to 13 and run on that for a bit to understand how steep that actually is.
Yeah, I noted that our friends over at letsrun.com had a very comprehensive feature on this race and talked quite a bit about the course. And Jonathan Galt, who wrote the piece, identified a couple of sections that he says were between 12 and 16% grade hills, which is like, that's power walking. That's not running.
Mm-hmm. That's trail running, friends. That's hiking.
That's right. I mean, I think it's going to make for incredible TV. Yeah. I don't know how much these runners are going to enjoy it. So between 14 and 20-ish K, there's a little over 500 feet of climbing. So that's a 6K or 3.8-ish mile stretch, and its average is 2.55% grade climb. So that'll just take the wind out of you over a period of time. And that's at a really tough point in the race. It's at a point in the race where you kind of want to be comfortable still and settle as a marathon runner, right? Not where you want to be having an elevated heart rate and working pretty hard. And just to, like, as a point of comparison, the Newton Hills, which Katelyn's very familiar with because you're a Newtonian.
I'm a Newtonian.
Is that what you guys call it yourselves?
Yeah,
Newtonians?
Newtonians.
Oh, nice. Got it.
Good job.
The Boston Newton Hills, with the famous Heartbreak Hill, is about 150 feet of climbing over a mile and a half. And that's only a 1.89% grade. Right. So you're doing the Newton Hills for 2.5 times more Newton Hills with a, like, what is that? Like, I'm just eyeballing the percentage here, like a 30% higher, tougher overall grade. So have fun with that, guys. That's going to be rough.
We're not breaking any world record times here.
No, not at all. Actually, that's a really interesting question. What are the times going to be? We can flip on that later on. We can talk about that when we talk about our predictions at the end. But, like, I don't even know. It's kind of like, who knows what the times are going to be. No, but yeah, so this course got way more total elevation gain than Boston or New York. It's like nearly 1,500 feet, whereas Boston and New York are around 800. And then the total drop is also more than Boston and New York, although Boston's pretty close. Boston's like nearly 1,300 feet of descending, which is the reason why Boston's really hard. But this Olympic course is 1,430 feet of descending. So these runners' legs are going to be trashed. Yes. Absolutely trashed. So it's something to watch out for. It's going to play a huge role. I think it's going to create a pretty wide open race in both races. The women's race, I think, has maybe a clear favorite. I don't know. We'll debate. We can discuss this after, but we'll get into the women's race in a second. But let's talk about the men's race first. Okay. So it's happening on Saturday morning, 3:00 in the morning, as I said, Eastern time. I don't know who the favorite is. I'm curious to hear if either of you have a take on that. But I think the very first person we need to talk about, just out of
respect.
sheer respect, kiss the ring. Is the defending Olympic champion Eliud Kipchoge, who's looking to three-peat. If he is able to pull this off, I mean, we would bend the knee, bow before the great one. I think he's already the greatest of all time. But this is kind of like Tom Brady winning that Tampa Bay Buccaneers championship at the end of the career, just to let everyone know, like, I can do this at all phases of my career.
Yep.
So for Kipchoge, I mean, he won Tokyo pretty comfortably, but it's been a rough ride the last couple of years.
True. He's
no longer as dominant as he once was. Although, you know, again, the Let's Run article noted that he set a world record, which was since bettered, but he set a world record like less than 2 years ago in Berlin. So he's like he's still got that speed, but like Alex, I think the big question mark with Kipchoge is whether or not he can handle the course more than anything else. Even I don't care if it's 2024, 2016, 2020. Like, Kipchoge's proven himself not to be a great runner when it comes to adverse conditions, let's say.
Yeah, for all his talk about how the mental game has a huge impact, he comes across as more of a time trialer than anything. His best runs being at these like curated events and some majors that are fast. And I mean,
shots fired, man. You just took a shot at the king there. Like, yeah,
I know. And he has a chance to prove himself.
You're right. I think you're right. It's like, there's all sorts of brand building around Kipchoge, the philosopher king of running, and it's all between the ears, and nothing is impossible, blah, 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 blah. But like, it seems pretty challenging for him to nail a Boston Marathon, which he did not do, or a really crappy day in really tough conditions in the middle of COVID at the London Marathon a couple of years back, where he faded to, I believe, 6th place and really struggled in that race. And I just wonder, and then Tokyo this year, you know, he just didn't look like the Kipper we know and love. He just looked like somebody who was really having a tough time when the race wasn't perfectly set up for him.
Yeah. I will say this in defense of Kipchoge is I think the world of marathoning has moved really quickly in the last couple of years. I'm thinking, you know, the rise and then the unfortunate death of Kelvin Kiptum in the span of months. I'm thinking of many runners joining the sub 203 ranks. And because it seems like so much time has passed, Kipchoge enters this conversation of, is he past his prime? Is he too old? I think you can maybe say this about Kenenisa Bekele, who's 5 years older than Kipchoge, but Kipchoge's 37. He's been 37 for 8 years now. And
I was going to say, I think he's turning 40 at the end later this year. What he's
the Olympic press release says 37. So let's go with that.
Does it really?
I swear he was 37 in 2018.
I think he's turning 40 this year.
I agree with Michael. I thought he was older than 37. I thought he was.
This might be a mistake in the press release. I'm not sure, but the age has always been kind of questionable with him. And I know people have been talking about this for many years, but I don't think I don't think he's past his prime. And I totally back up I totally back up that statement that like this guy was setting world records 2 years ago. That is not that long ago. What I think is a little rich is the Olympics playing up the rivalry between Kipper and Kenny, and that they're trying to serve that as the main event. It's not going to be Kipper and Kenny. Either one falters or both falter. I can't see the two of them battling it out as much as I would love to see it. I think there are many other big players that are going to screw that up.
You know, and I think that this is just an inspiring just side note to make. And I think that what Alex is saying about age and how marathon running and running in general has changed so much over time, because now it's not just like the young bucks who are always the best. And I see it a ton in the trail running world as well. And I think that this spills over into the marathoners, because to be a marathoner, you have to be a really smart runner. You can't be you can't just have that idea of going out and running my absolute hardest and burning out and, halfway through the race. You have to be super smart and strategic. And I think that comes with maturity. And I think that that's why these guys are doing such a good job later into their years, because, maybe they're holding on. They're not getting any better physically, perhaps, or perhaps they are, but they're maintaining their fitness, and then they're just getting better strategically and being able to keep that like running maturity. And so that's helping a lot, which I think is so cool because it just broadens the field so much to have these older runners also in there. And, you know, they're talked about. So, I mean, they're up there. They're the contenders. They're the big dogs.
Yeah, and I want to be careful to not be disrespectful about age, especially to you two who are now in your 40s and are still getting better with time.
Yes, we are.
Sorry,
yes,
I've
age
outed you.
like fine wines, Michael.
Like fine wine. But you see this happen in the pros a whole lot too, right? You know, people run their best marathons higher than the age of 40 very often. Yeah. And I heard the announcers on the track a couple of days ago refer to one of the, I think it was a sprinter, I can't remember, as being at the seasoned age of 26. And I just cringed a little bit thinking, right, sprinting and marathon running are very different sports with how they relate to age. So 37 or however old Kipchoge is certainly not too old to make to win gold.
Yeah, I mean, just to flip back to on the track for a second, like Mo Ahmed that we talked about before, the Canadian 5,000, 10,000 meter runner, like he's in his early 30s, and it kind of feels like this might be his last Olympics on the track, and he just missed an incredible opportunity, which is really tragic for him, right? Because he is really one of the best North American distance runners on the track ever, and he probably has no place to go now but up to the marathon. We'll see if he wants to move up to that. I think with Kipchoge, just to put a pin on, or put a cap on the Kipchoge talk here, is I think Kipchoge in his own way is sort of the creator of his own not downfall, because he's had such an incredible career, but he has sort of created these conditions or this scenario right now that he's got to live in, which is he is the guy who pushed for breaking 2 hours. He's the guy who led the way with the development of super shoes and inspired Nike to develop something in the lab that was going to help an athlete like him gain an advantage over everyone else in 2016. And that's when it all began with the Super Shoe project, very secretively. Mm-hmm. And so fast forward many years later, we're now, 8 years later from that moment. And Kipchoge is going to face off with all of these runners that have benefited from his trailblazing efforts, right? And all the technology that was built effectively, not for him, but with him as the vessel for it, right? So that's kind of an interesting dynamic right now in 2024 with a guy like Eliud Kipchoge trying to eke out one last great moment before perhaps riding off into the sunset.
And I hope he does.
Yeah, it would be a neat experience. It would be a neat narrative for the Olympics and for him. But yeah, so let's talk about the other major contenders here. So, I mean, we've talked about, someone mentioned the great one, the aged one, Kenenisa Bekele. Alex, I think you've showed us your hand here. Do you think that Kenenisa Bekele, who's 42 years old, entering these Olympic Games, he's finally made it in the marathon after a couple of attempts previously that failed? He's had a streaky relationship to this distance, but he's really one of the great distance runners of all time. I mean, his first Olympic gold medal on the track was in 2004, wow. Which is crazy, 20 years ago. But he's coming into this, as you said, like maybe this is just a media narrative that is easy to gravitate towards, but he's run really, really well in the last couple of years. The marathon seems to suit him more or less. I have big question marks over whether or not he's going to be able to handle a gritty course in Paris. But, he's an interesting figure to watch for sure.
Yeah, I think he's one of those talents that, he could hop on the podium, and then in hindsight we say, of course, Kenenisa, it makes sense that he's there, but he hasn't shown it in recent years. I think the difference between Bekele and Kipchoge is Bekele really found his greatness on the track. The marathon's been tougher, whereas Kipchoge, it's harder to count him out than to count Kenenisa out because he's been so consistent on the roads. I think that's just what Bekele's missing.
Yeah. I can flag some other names for us here. So if you're listening at home and you're you're creating your little cheat sheet here so that you can follow along and you can identify certain names. Alexander Mutiso of Kenya, he won London and Valencia. He won Valencia at the end of 2023, and he won London this spring.
He also he goes by Munyao, does he?
He also goes by Munyao, yes.
Metiso and Munyao.
Yes, there's your tribal name and then a surname in Kenya. So that's why things get a little bit confusing. So I don't know they haven't released the bib designations yet, but it'll be either Munyao or Metiso. So, and then, but he's but more of a time trialer, right? Because he's won these very fast courses. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's Tim Kiplagat who came second in Tokyo. But again, Tokyo's sort of a fast course, right? And late replacement here is Tamarit Tola of Ethiopia has replaced your guy, Alex, Cisse Lema, who won Boston, who kind of felt like before Lema dropped out, has a hamstring injury. Before he dropped out, it kind of felt a little bit like he was the guy to pick for the win, right?
He was on my list. Yeah, he was on my list.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then fellow Ethiopian Teresa Gilletta, who won Beijing and Seville in the last couple of years. Beijing is interesting because it's a hard race because of like air quality is always a big factor. It's always very hot and muggy in Beijing. So he's won a tough race and he's run, I think, around the 203 range. So he's also fast. So that's someone to keep an eye on. Who else do you guys have? I mean, it's really, I don't know who wins this race.
Did you mention Kipruto, who's won Boston, Chicago, Tokyo?
Oh, maybe I didn't because that's my pick.
Oh, yeah.
Benson Kipruto.
Oh, you copycat. He's my pick.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into that. Benson Kipruto of Kenya. He's really ascended. He's 33. Alex, you and I we've met the man years back. He won the Toronto Waterfront Marathon sort of when he was ascending. He trained in Kipchoge's famous global sports camp training group. I believe he still does train in that group. I don't know if he's like a direct training partner with Kipchoge. There's a lot of guys in that group, but he's garnered a lot of experience. He's won Boston in 21. He won Chicago in 22. Chicago, I wouldn't factor in because it's a very flat course. Right. And then he won Tokyo this year in a big personal best where he made a huge jump in terms of his performance level. So he's a guy definitely to watch out for. And I would say the last two people that I would highlight here are Abni Nagie, who is from the Netherlands, and Bashir Abdi of Belgium. They train together, very good runners who've had very consistent results over the last couple of years. So don't be surprised if you see those guys sort of hovering around in the main pack and you're like, who's the Belgian guy and who's the guy with the Dutch singlet on? That they're legit. So keep an eye on them. Well, let's talk about the Americans very briefly before we go into our picks, which, Katelyn and I just spoiled.
Yeah, we spoiled. Sorry.
So we've got three Americans, Connor Mantz, Clayton Young, and our boy Lenny Carrier. He made it. He's here or there in Paris. Do any three of these guys have a chance
to win?
Let's say to medal. Let's go podium.
To medal. I'm more bullish on another North American to medal. I'll get into that a bit later, but I think they will need a huge effort. These Clayton Young and Connor Mantz, being BYU products, have spent a lot of time at altitude, which involves difficult training. I don't know how altitude translates to like a hilly course, but the difficulty is there for both. That's about as far as I can take it. You see Americans do so well in these marathons, in these Olympic marathons. And I mean, America's on a tear, so I wouldn't count them out, but they're not my pick to win.
I would note that Leonard Carrier came in fourth in the Atlanta U.S. Olympic trials. Now, I'm reaching deep in the bag here. And that was an extremely hilly course that was very comparable in some ways to Paris. So,
Okay.
and very adverse conditions and very warm, which Paris will also be very warm. We didn't even talk about the heat when we talked about the course. It's going to be warm, even though it's starting at a decent time at 8:00 in the morning. That's still not, I think, early enough to escape the heat in the end. So I would say, although, you know what, all three of these guys did really well to prepare for pretty tough conditions in Orlando in March for the U.S. Olympic trials. It was very hot, although it was a very flat course. But Mance and Young in particular were very prepared. They were very ready, and they looked in total command of the race, and they kind of knew what they were doing. And they seem to just know exactly how to dole out the effort, and they have a pretty good strategy. We actually have a really good feature on their approach training, and that you edited, Katelyn. That's absolutely excellent. That Amby Burfoot, our sort of our godfather at Marathon Handbook. He wrote the piece, chatted with Ed Eyestone, their coach, Clayton Young, and Connor Mance's coach, and also to both of them as well, and got their insights into how they're approaching this. And they have a pretty sound strategy in terms of just like sitting and waiting and being patient and matching moves when they need to be matched, and then really trying to race the last 10 kilometers. Which
they also had some tricks of the trade for the heat too. So hopefully that will transfer really well to Paris, that Amby talks about in that feature, which is really, really nice.
Yeah. And then Alex, you teased another North American that I think might be a legit dark horse, at least a medal threat for sure. And that's Cam Levins. That's our boy, the Canadian. We spent a lot of time chatting with Cam over the years. So I feel like I certainly have a little bit of a bias. I'm definitely cheering for him personally as a fan. But he's legitimately, I say, a threat here because he's somebody who is going to have very carefully prepared for this course specifically. I know that he's been thinking about Paris for a long time. He told me in an interview I did with him maybe a year and a half ago, that he was foregoing a lot of other things in life to focus on Paris, skipping a lot of big opportunities just to key in on the Paris Olympic Games. So
putting his wild partying lifestyle on hold for a couple of years.
Oh, wow.
Alex is being a touch sarcastic there because Mr. Levins is all about running all the time. So I think he's somebody you should definitely watch out for as well. He'll have the Canadian vest on. So picks, let's do them. Men's marathon. Who wins and who's your dark horse? Katelyn, you go first.
Okay. Well, even though we kind of spoiled it, I think Kipruto is going to be our guy, winning Boston, the times that he has. He's my first pick for the marathon. I have a dark horse. I have a problem with predictions. I think that I'm not really good at it because I think I predict with the heart and I choose dark horses of people who I really want to win, that also think that maybe could be a surprise. Because I really liked watching the British runner Emil come in third in the London Marathon. And I know that he has more of a track background, but he just ran that race so well. And it was really inspiring for me to watch him win third place. And so my bet is on him as the dark horse, even though he may not have as much experience or experience running really hard courses. But I'm going to go with him for my dark horse.
Well, sometimes the lack of experience, like to play one of the, to lean into one of the sports cliches, it's like he just doesn't know how big the stage is for him right now. He doesn't know that he shouldn't be there. That could be that narrative when he if he finds his way onto the podium. Alex, who's your pick in your dark horse?
Ethiopia's against the wall. No Cisse Lema. They need to pick someone else to replace him. They take a ringer. Tamirat Tola.
It's a good pick.
I think he's taking the win. He's got Olympic experience. He was the bronze medalist in Rio over 10K. He's a world champion marathoner. He won the marathon in Eugene in 2022. And most recently, he has the 2023 win in New York. And now every time I look at someone's bio, it's like, okay, which hilly races did they do? And now I'm realizing that there aren't many hilly races out there that these guys do. They chase times over the year. The majors are pretty flat. And so, yeah, it's possible that he doesn't have what it takes over the hills. We're not going to know until the race. So to me, Tola is as good a contender as any. So I'm putting my money on him.
My requirement was a Boston and/or New York City strong showing. Didn't necessarily have to be a win, but just somebody who is willing to show up in New York and Boston and race those courses because they are not paced. Boston, I think, pays a little bit less than the other marathon majors, which is a factor when you're a pro runner, right? You're racing for money. And the courses they're not sexy times when you're competing in Boston, New York, and they're also really brutal experiences if you're running them, especially if you're running them at that high level. They're tough, especially Boston. So that was one of the prerequisites for me for a pick. I'm going chalk here. I'm picking Benson Kipruto for the win. Mm-hmm. I just think that he has got all the tools to deliver. I think he went up against the big dog and Eliud Kipchoge in Tokyo and was completely unbothered by the attention that Kipchoge was getting. And the race really did feel like, we covered that race pretty closely. The Japanese definitely set the table for Kipchoge to run a great race and really keyed on him. And he was the big A-lister, the big headliner of that event. And then Kipruto just showed up and ruined it for him and ran the race of his life. So, and he's also shown that he can really execute on a hilly course in adverse conditions as well. So I'm going with Kipruto for the win. I'm pulling way into the bag for my dark horse.
Okay.
Check this one out, guys. Uganda's Victor Kiplangat. He won the mountain running championships about 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh, nice.
There's my guy. So he's somebody who's comfortable with the power walking. He's comfortable with the steep climbs. He's comfortable with it getting messy, getting ugly, getting gritty. He's not looking at his friggin' Garmin the entire time, fretting about how he's not hitting his splits. So that's what I'm going for. He's my dark horse pick. We'll see. I'm really rolling the dice. Okay, let's pivot into the women's race.
Okay.
Super cool this year. First time in history, the women's marathon closes the Olympics. It's Sunday, 2:00 in the morning Eastern time. It's being billed as the marquee event. I think it's maybe a better overall race in terms of depth and intrigue than the men's race, although I say they're very close. Let's go through who we think the favorites are and what the main storylines are. I think, Alex, you mentioned earlier in the pod, the very first thing that we have to look at is Tigst Assefa of Ethiopia. She is the current world record holder by a long shot. I could say by a mile, and I could literally be correct. By a mile. Finally, that cliche it's actually useful here. Almost more or less by a mile. She's run 2:11. I mean, she's just like cream of the crop. She did run London in April and did not win that race, but was in it till the end, which I was impressed by. Watched that race live in London, so I got to see it with my very own eyes, and she was hanging at the end. I think there was some fear or suspicion that she was a one-trick pony, that Berlin race that she ran last year was going to be it for her. But she's in these Olympic Games, and she is definitely somebody everyone's going to be paying attention to. And certainly the broadcasters, the media that are covering this race, when you're watching this race live on TV or streaming it, they're going to be talking a lot about her, and she should be in that lead pack. Do you guys think she is going to deliver?
I'm not sure. I see this race as a battle between time, experience, and game. Time is Tigst Assefa. Experience is Peres Jepchirchir. She's the defending Olympic champ. She knows how to deliver on the stage. And then game is Hellen Obiri.
Yeah.
She's won Boston the last 2 times. New York in 2023. Michael, you say your criteria is Boston, New York. By that definition, you must pick Hellen Obiri for the win. There's nobody else. But all 3 have a different ace in their hand. And is 2:11, what does that mean over the hills? I don't know. I'm curious to find out. But I think it's going to be tough for Assefa to run away with it. I think the others have they have something. They have something in their hand.
It's funny that Alex is mentioning those three because I'm not going to say in what order they are, but like those are the three that I think
that's your podium.
That's my podium. Like the race for me is between those three women, and exactly for those reasons. Because you're like, okay, well, you can't completely cut out someone with that time, with that amazing time. Like we can say, okay, maybe she's best in just, flat courses. And it was like this one-time wonder. I don't think so. But, we still have to take that into consideration, even though this course is going to be extremely difficult. So I also have like these extremes thinking like, okay, each one has their special characteristic and their strength. And so to see like them battling out the strengths and see which strength is more important for this race.
Okay, so let's pivot to, I think, who is the prohibitive favorite in the race. You just mentioned the resume, Alex. Peres Jepchirchir of Kenya. She's the reigning Olympic champion. She's won feels like everything. Yes. She's won Boston. She's won London. She's won New York. She's got the women's only world record. So the women's only world record is, it just means that there are no male pacers running with them. And it has to be, the pacers have to be women or just no pacers at all. And she set that mark in London of this year. So she's at the peak of her powers and ran 2:16.16 in the process. And she's held the women's half marathon record in the past, and I believe still has the women's only half marathon record. So she's very quick over the shorter distance as well. I think she's going into this, she's got to be the favorite. I mean, she's the queen of distance running right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, and if you look at head to head, I think London might be the best proxy for this. Helen Obiri competing more on the North American side, and then her two competitors more on the other side of the Atlantic. But London was a good one because Jepchirchir actually edged out Assefa near the end, right? Put 7 seconds on her, and a very close race. But also, when the push comes to shove, and it's not a time trial, maybe you have to give Jepchirchir the edge because of that.
And then there's Helen Obiri of Kenya. She trains in Colorado and runs for On Running. And curious detail, we haven't talked about shoes at all, which is crazy, Alex. I mean, we've got you here and we've not discussed shoes once talking about these marathons, but she's wearing a very interesting shoe that was prototyped in Boston that we got to see. And we were kind of like, what is that shoe? It's like a slipper with no shoelaces. Turns out it's this really neat shoe that On came up with that obviously has some serious performance upside because she just crushed the last couple of miles of the Boston Marathon. It looks super fresh at the end. But her thing is coming in, she's got Boston 23, New York 23, Boston 24. I mean, she's flying in with, I would say, if you're looking for someone with the most immaculate resume to win the Paris Olympic Games, that's the gold standard right there, with like back to back of these really tough courses, being able to pull off great performances there. So I'd say that she is also a big favorite. What do you guys think about what do you think about the American trio of runners? There's three women representing the United States: Emily Sisson, Dakota Lindworm, and Fiona O'Keefe, who in her debut marathon at the U.S. Olympic Marathon Trials in March, won the whole damn thing, ran a really impressive time, really great performance. The heat didn't seem to bother her at all, drove the pace in the last third of the race. I mean, totally owned everyone in that field. Do we think that any of these three women can find their way to the podium?
I don't think we'll see them.
Wow.
I think the front is too strong. I think, they might have a great race in the chase pack, but I think the front is too strong and it's going to overshadow the American race. Lindworm, O'Keefe in particular, I think has an amazing future in the marathon, given that she's so new and she's going to chalk this up as experience. But I think that the top is too strong for the Americans to keep pace.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see it, and I would love for one to prove us wrong, because it would be amazing to have Team USA up there. But it seems like the competition in this race is just so tough.
And we can give a brief shout out to Alex, our fellow Canadian in the race, Melindy Elmore, who is the same age as me. She's 44 years old, and she is running extremely well. I chatted with her a little while ago, and she sounds like she's well prepared. She was running in some extreme heat and on some hilly courses out in British Columbia, where she lives in interior BC. And also, like, kind of a cool thing, I'm sure a lot of athletes did this. I was reading some of the other athletes did do this, which is she actually traveled to Paris earlier this year and ran big chunks of the course, in particular that middle section of the course that's super hilly. She wanted to see what it was like, so she went and ran it a couple of times, and then also kind of walked through the finishing area on foot, because it's like a major tourist trap when it's not the Olympics. When the Olympics are not going on, it's not shut down to the world. So she sort of like did the walkthrough with that, trying to envision what it was like. And she did really well in Tokyo in that pressure cooker, like literal humidity pressure cooker in Sapporo. So keep an eye on her as a top 10. I'm not saying I'm a podium threat, but in terms of a strong top 10 finish and a strong second half, keep an eye on her. Okay, guys, our picks. Alex, you get to go first this time. Who's going to win the women's marathon, and who is your dark horse pick?
I think for her recent success and her gamerness, I'm going with Hellen Obiri. She does well, and she's done well recently on many courses. And I think that's what she might have over Jepchirchir. Jepchirchir has been winning for a long time, yes, but I don't think she's been as recently dominant so often as Obiri. So I'm giving it to her. My dark horse, and I think this is going to be a Cole Hawker situation. Everyone's talking about the top three. This particular athlete gets to fly under the radar, free of pressure. Sharon Lokedi. Here's another athlete. Well, we probably had the same train of thought, right? An athlete who did super well at the most recent Boston Marathon. She finished second. I feel like we haven't seen the best of her yet. She's relatively new on the scene. And so I think it's going to be tough for Lokedi to knock one of these women off the podium, but also I could see one of these top three faltering and opening the door for Lokedi. I could see her winning a medal.
Yeah. And Katelyn, your picks?
My pick, well, I told you guys the three were my podium and Obiri. I also have as number one. I have Obiri, Jepchirchir, and Assefa as gold, silver, and bronze, if all goes well for them. And my dark horse, this was tricky for me because, again, I'm speaking with my heart. I don't think we didn't mention Hassan, and I think that she's probably going to end up getting, like we didn't mention her, and I still think what she's doing is pretty cool. And I know that, she didn't get gold we just watched the 5,000. And so I don't know if she's holding back and trying to conserve some energy. So I just kind of wanted to mention her because who knows, if maybe she takes it easy, she can pull through for the marathon. So I have her like as my dark horse. Maybe she's going to surprise everyone and she's going to rest up and have this amazing energy. I think it's going to be tricky, but she's there. She's always in the back of my mind thinking like it would be awesome for her to podium in one of these races in the marathon.
Good call. I can't believe we didn't talk about Sifan Hassan, but there we go. All right. My picks are, I'm going Peres Jepchirchir.
Okay.
She's just too good. And my dark horse, as I spoiled moments ago, Sharon Lokedi. As you said, Alex, really strong run in Boston, won New York previously, flying under the radar. She was initially not even picked she was the alternate for the Kenyan team, and then got to move into that spot as the third pick. And I think that she's going to have a really great race. So there's our picks. There's the marathons. It's going to be amazing. We'll try to get some sort of a podcast out in terms of instant reactions. I don't know if it's going to be at like 6:00 in the morning Eastern time, but we'll try to figure out some sort of way to give our instant feedback as to what happens, because I think it's going to be a lot of drama on the streets of Paris. All right, guys, thanks very much, and we'll talk after the Olympics are over.
Happy watching.